It's 23 degrees in Bloomington. I think it's like 24 degrees in Detroit. I think we got the same weather pattern right now.
Well, that was random. Exceptional radio.
Yeah, like even down to even our day and night high and low temperature is going to be the same, 26 and 16.
Yes, I've noticed that the Bloomington weather pattern is closer to Detroit's than Indianapolis, which is weird in that I knew Detroit, or I always knew Bloomington's was like slightly off. But it must, I don't know if it's like Lake Lemon and Lake Monroe that give it the effects, but it definitely feels like Bloomington and Detroit have more in common than Indianapolis and Bloomington.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
I bet it's the lake. I bet it's proximity to water. I mean, Indianapolis is close to Geist, but Indianapolis is also a big pancake in the middle of a field.
It says it's 27 here now. Which it was only supposed to get to 25, but I think because we're getting like really bright sun, it's heating it up more. So, yeah, it's like really interesting to see. The wildest shit is where we're situated. We're north of Canada to a degree, which is like, you wouldn't think there's that many places in America that are north of Canada, especially Detroit. I mean, obviously not the whole of Canada, but you know what I mean.
Well, yeah. And there is that entire state of Canada, which is completely north of all of Canada.
This is where nation lines are so ridiculous, especially with like Alaska and Hawaii.
And add the distortion of the map that we've all grown accustomed to.
Oh my god!
That like the oversized representation of like Greenland and Alaska.
Well, it's weird in that I feel like the globe was always so small, it never really gave a true representation. Obviously, it's
more accurate than a flat map.
That's true, but in that nobody ever says like what scale the globe is when you're looking at it. And I think it would really help.
Oh yeah,
like if somebody was like, "Oh, this is like a 26,000th scale,"
yeah,
or something.
1/100,000th scale.
Yeah.
I need to look this up.
And it's like, I just
1 to 40 million is a 1 foot globe.
So that, that's like the first time.
That's unfathomable.
I feel like that's the first time anybody that's not a globe maker or an astronomer has actually heard that number, because I've never heard of a fucking a scale model on that scale, because I look at scale model numbers all the time and I'm used to like the most I've seen is like a starship, and it was I think 1,000th or one. It was like off where the number didn't end in 0, but maybe it was like in the 10,000. So I was assuming, it was going to be in the thousands just because that's what I'm used to seeing. But obviously it makes more sense if it's in the millions. So I think that's
I'm sorry. I was wrong. That's for a 1 meter globe. For a 1 foot globe, it's 1 to the 42 million.
Jesus Christ. Okay. That makes so again, I feel like that's the first time anybody who's not in those specific fields has ever heard that number spoken aloud, because that to me is the mind, like my mind is struggling to grasp that number. But the only reason I can even start to fathom it is because I've flown over so much of the planet where I'm like, it just takes so much time to get around the planet when you're going like 300 miles an hour, 400 miles an hour, and it still takes like 18 hours to get to certain parts.
That's bigger than that's bigger than a basketball and bigger than most beach balls that people have ever experienced. A 1 meter sphere is actually quite large.
Well, I know we've talked about the scale model of the distance between the planets before, because they have one of those in Bloomington.
Yeah.
Where it's like you go, one planet is on like 3rd Street and then the next planet is on like the edge of town or some shit. Or, so it's like,
yeah,
we have a scale distance representation, but even then it's like,
well, the size is screwy because all the planets can fit between the space between the Earth and the Moon. It's hard to fathom just how big things actually are.
Right. Yeah.
This our funky water covered potato shaped planet.
I mean, but the space between the Earth and the Moon is like that. It's not. It's only small relative to like
the Earth to the sun.
Anything else, yeah. Because there's not really many other satellites or.
But that gap is big enough for all of the planets, except for the sun.
Yeah. So
sun's not a planet. So we could fit every object that's like, collectible in the solar system between the Earth and the Moon. And there'd still probably be a lot of space. But yeah, even the difference between a 1 to 40 million scale versus 1 to 42 million scale, that's incomprehensible. Really, we can see it. It's the difference between a 1 meter orb and a 1 foot orb, but like in the framework of the planet Earth, it still doesn't make sense. It's so much bigger than that little globe represents. Like, it's easy to think. I guess it's easy to see or to think. Yeah, it's just this tiny little blue marble with a bunch of pink and yellow patches on it. Pink, yellow, and green patches.
Well, that's where Flight Simulator really helps give a perspective on it without having to leave one's home.
Holy crap. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I saw a video of somebody playing Flight Simulator with like a 4080 card, and it was 4K and everything was turned on, and it was incredible to watch. Like there is the line between like the game space, like they've crossed into the uncanny valley, I think is how you've described it before. It's so incredible, especially the way that they tie in like all the being weather and traffic information, and that stuff actually looks real. It has to be the most comprehensive like reality simulator that I've ever seen.
Yeah, it gets really crazy when you're like circling an airport waiting for the people who are playing as tower controllers to do the traffic control. That's when shit gets really crazy. It's like I don't know if you've played The Crew or any of the games in that series.
No, but I've had a few good laughs reading about people playing like the tower, or playing any role other than trying to fly the plane.
Well, The Crew is like a completely separate game series.
Okay.
Where you can, it's like a vehicle focused franchise, but they have basically like every vehicle, not like everyone that's ever been made, but every type of vehicle. So it's like they have motocross, they have monster trucks, they have prop planes, they have jets. I think they have jets. I haven't. I I, I assume they have jets just because I haven't flown one yet. But I just um anyway. They have hovercraft. Um, but the thing is, there's good and bad about having online maps where everybody's in the same, you know, everything happens in the same location because it makes it feel alive. Where worlds with NPCs can feel alive, but it's really difficult to get to them to that point.
Oh,
Whereas like
that's
the Crew series, it's really awesome, but there's some drawbacks. So go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, you just reminded me that like part of the reason that Eve Online is so still interests me, even though I'm not really willing to pay for it at this point, is just the totality of commerce is completely player driven. Like the entire in-game economy is comprised of player driven activity, like objects that are created by players. There's very little activity that's generated by the game itself. Like the in-game missions are essentially just varying degrees of difficulty for tutorials on how to play the game. And there's something to be said for that. Like that kind of activity, it does feel like there's more going on. But when it comes down to it, the game is still very much managing spreadsheets in a dark screen. And with or without all of those other people, the game still looks the same. It still has similar, the mechanics exist. And so there's something about that that's very attractive. But at the same time, it's also, you're right, it's very chaotic. I think that's the kind of thing that helps to simulate reality, though.
Well, but then there's the problem is then you have to deal with the marginal douchebags that make reality like difficult.
Yeah,
because it'll be like you'll be doing a challenge or something, and then say it's a race. Well, you might have somebody sitting at the end of the race blocking the finish line. So if you're doing a great job, suddenly you run into like somebody parked on the middle of the fucking road that's gonna prevent you from getting a higher world ranking.
Yeah,
because it's like the rankings go against everybody who's playing. So it's like if I'm doing a challenge, I'm not just racing my best time. I'm racing 12,000 other people's time.
Yeah,
and then when one of those douchebags is like, oh, my time, I want to get the weekly reward or whatever, so I'm going to prevent you from getting a better time by sitting here and just like parking my car here and leaving it there while I go do some shit outside of the house, or maybe I'm not going to leave the house. That person, it just drags the fun level down just enough to make it like annoying, but not enough to make you quit the game, which is where I'm like, it's the same shit those people do in real life, which is where it'd be great if we could just block those people out of real life or the video games. But
so in Eve, I would often run multiple machines so I could have like just a second ship to carry my junk around, all my salvage, and it would usually just hang back in like the next system over, just never in any danger. And this behavior wasn't really frowned upon at all. It was kind of expected that, once you're doing enough of something, you're going to need a little bit more than just one ship, or you need a really big ship, and then that becomes expensive. But then, like, that's not the kind of thing you can just, like, make your second ship follow you around and let it just be away from the other keyboard. You actually have to play both. You have to pilot both ships. So it's not just, like, a rolling around with a trailer. But what I've noticed in Star Trek is that occasionally I see a person who has they'll have two ships that are almost the same, and they have the same names, and then I look at their info and it's like a clone of the other character, and then one of their ships doesn't do anything. It just hangs out. They just sit there and take up space and make it difficult to get through the task force objective. Where, you know, when 5 people get together to merge to form Voltron. It doesn't work when only, you know, 4 people are doing the thing. I mean, it does, because most of the time at least 2 people have more ships than they need.
So what you've just nailed upon is something I thought about this past week. It's not about Star Trek ships.
Oh no, I'm just thinking about it in terms of games that I play.
No.
Like
No. But the thing that the irony of what you're talking about is there's no real individualism in capitalism, even though that's the big selling point, is like you can be the most individualistic person ever. The problem with being able to buy things is that anybody can buy them. That means nobody can have things specifically unless there's only a one of one made. And usually if there's a one of one made, somebody can then use money to convince that person to make another one if it was sold in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like,
so that kind of thing can happen in Eve, but in Star Trek, no matter what you craft, it's like bound to the account. Like the really fancy stuff, you can't just sell it. So they've kind of
no. It doesn't matter if you can sell it, but you're buying it or crafting it from a set standard. So eventually 2 people are going to come up with the same thing because they're only given the same pieces to start with.
Oh, sure.
That's where I mean, like, if I go into a Macy's, I could pick out 2 random pieces or 17 random pieces, articles of clothing and accessories, and be like, oh, I'm an independent individual who is unique. And the chances of some other person coming and picking out those random 17 pieces is like infinitesimally small, but it's not 0, which is where, again, if I had to make all those 17 pieces from scratch, it still wouldn't be 0 that another person would be able to get to that same point without intentionally doing it, but it'd be way more difficult than if they could just go buy those pieces. And that's where I mean, like, the capacity for people to end up, and the funny thing about plastic surgery is they finally figured out, after so many surgeries, there's only a set number of variations on, like, the noses, the chins, the cheekbones, the fucking ears, the eye. There's only so many faces that they can actually end up making, which is why a lot of these people end up looking like fucking the same cat. And I mean like a feline, and I don't mean like cat as in like a slang term. Like, a lot of them end up looking like cats.
Yeah, these cats, they were real hip. They were down at the diner real late.
These cool cats. But it's like there's like a point when people get plastic surgery on their face and they keep going past it. And after a certain point, they all start to look feline. It's too much lip filler. And there's like a double cleft that they put on the top lip that everybody, after so many surgeries, their face just doesn't stop. Like, it doesn't go back down from the swelling. And it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen those. I don't want to mock it. It's like a tragic story of 2 physicist twins who, I mean, you can't get plastic surgery without having some sort of like insecurity. They definitely had some crazy insecurities, but they ended up, I think the only way and people in America know them is because of that meme of the extreme, like, plastic surgery face, where
Oh yeah.
They looked exactly alike even after all the plastic surgery because they kept getting the same surgeries. And in wherever they were from, they were super famous for being geniuses or physicists, like I think it was physicists or something, or some sort of engineer. Anyway, these dudes ended up unrecognizable from the way they were like not ugly guys. So for somebody to be that insecure about aging, whether it's because of society or just some neurotic shit, the things they turned into are clearly not attractive, but the doctors kept the fact that the doctors kept doing surgeries is criminal. I don't understand how that shit's like obviously it's a choice, but somebody who chooses to end up looking like that is clearly not making decisions in the proper mind state. Cause it's like I know if Madonna could choose to go back and not get any plastic surgeries and have a couple wrinkles on her cheeks and like not look like a fucking cat, if she was in her right mind, she wouldn't do it. But if she chose not to go back and undo all those plastic surgeries, clearly something's wrong. So I don't mean it's like a specific mental illness or that they're actually mentally ill. It could be that society has just beaten them down so much that they don't see themselves as valuable unless they conform to these certain aesthetics that by the end it's like obviously nobody's like attracted to that, but I think what those surgeries represent concerning status and caste, that's what I think Madonna and Little Kim and um I don't know anybody, those are the worst that come to mind, but they're clearly not the only ones where I'm like, it's definitely not only women either. Like Dana White looks fucking terrible. He definitely has had some
Sorry,
facial
I just
surgery
pulled up
done.
a picture of little Kim. I haven't seen.
Yeah, she doesn't look like anything. What's wild is
That doesn't look like little Kim anymore. Who is
I
that?
mean, I can't blame somebody who makes part of their identity being aesthetically pleasing to an audience for being neurotic about their appearance over time. It's like it only makes sense really, but I feel like Lil Kim would have looked way better if she just didn't get any surgery. It would I feel like that's true with like literally everybody who gets any surgery. Not to say that it can't end up working in someone's favor for whatever reason if they get a single surgery, because I know this girl that I went to high school with, she had like an overbite in her chin, like it made it seem like she had no chin, and then she got surgery and it like extended her jawline and it like corrected the overbite, where I'm like, I don't know if that would have been like better for her not to get it, but she didn't continue to get a bunch of surgeries and she got it in high school, which is where I'm like, I feel like if somebody is compelled enough to get a surgery in high school, it's because they've probably been made fun of to the point where they just don't want to see that thing anymore, which is like, I don't know if anybody can get over that type of emotional trauma without just getting surgery, because it's like people in the previous generations downplayed bullying, just suck it up, walk it off. It's like you can't walk off emotional trauma, motherfuckers. Fuck off with that. Like, so I don't think anybody should ever take any emotional advice from boomers, because for various reasons, not to say that they all have the same emotional deficiencies, but they all have emotional deficiencies. Like, and millennials have emotional deficiencies, but they're different. It's completely different types, and that is not really empathizing with other people or sympathizing with other people. That's the problem. So that's where I'm like, knowing that multiple people in my high school got plastic surgery but stopped, I know that there's a line where being made fun of and being able to like get rid of that thing that people make fun of you about can give you some relief or release from that trauma. But it's not always the case. And then I think that's where if someone continues to get surgery, they were under the assumption that the original surgery would start to get rid of that trauma or whatever discomfort with themselves that caused them to get the first surgery. So I'm like, I'm not going to say I'm anti-plastic surgery so much as there's definitely a line when somebody crosses it after a number of plastic surgeries, it starts to become more damaging to their psyche than it is beneficial. And it doesn't matter if they have a mental illness or if it's because they're trying to please themselves or someone else. After a certain point, the end overrules the means, so it doesn't even matter why. So that's, to me, is, again, I'm not going to say where that line is, but once people get that feline look, everybody knows that they've crossed that line. So that's where to me, any plastic surgeon who has a patient who has gotten to that feline point, I feel like their license just should be taken away, and just like they should be taken out of the market of the possibility of, like, people shouldn't be ending up looking like that.
Yeah, there's a difference between like giving people what they want and preventing them from like going further down the rabbit hole of psychosis.
Exactly, because if I ask somebody to do something that they know is going to make me look worse and end up having to come back to get something else done to try to fix that, that's exploitation. And further, if that person's like, I don't want to do it because I'm against the outcome, and then I'm like, well, I'll give you $10 million. And then that person's like, well, I guess I'm going to do it. That, I won't say it shouldn't be legal. It's definitely not ethical. And the person that does it should be investigated to make sure that they're not.
Well, I think that it's okay. So hear me out on this. Art has often celebrated the grotesque. Fashion is notorious for celebrating the grotesque. I mean, there are generations of photographs of fashion models who are just walking sticks. I mean, there's a whole thing called heroin chic. and that just celebrated these waifs that looked like a strong gust of wind would blow them over, and unhealthy looking bodies is what I'm trying to describe, I guess. And so on some level, yeah, art would love to celebrate the grotesque in any way, on some level, where it's like, yes, we can push boundaries of the aesthetic and make people uncomfortable and make them think and blah 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 and some more stuff. But in terms of body modification, and I think that's what we're really talking about, is facial modification. Body modification is like the realm of tattoos and piercings and implants, dermal implants. And at a point, it's not like, this isn't like elective surgery because somebody's got like a lipoma somewhere growing in their body and they want it removed, or because they've got some skin tags that they want removed. This is complex, like multi-stage, multifaceted surgery. Like this is like beyond. This is, I mean, the absolute definition of elective surgery, and it's not like. I mean, it's not like a person who goes in for rhinoplasty to correct the shape of their nose and their sinuses so that they can breathe. That's a completely like meaningful application of plastic surgery techniques. That's like, yeah, that's great. That helps somebody to breathe. But I think, oh man, that's such a big commitment. The person who wants to look like a cat or a lizard. And it's a huge commitment. There aren't many examples of people who commit fully, like who live very long either, that's like the sad part. It's like it's a very short trajectory.
Oh, I won't get into grotesque details, but all that shit is super painful.
Yeah.
The amount of time they spend recovering, doing physical therapy, it's like that alone should be a deterrent, but those people are willing to suffer through, sometimes months of recovery before they can go out in public and be seen with their new whatever body part. And obviously the same is the same is true for non-plastic surgical body modification. But that shit also gets to a point where some of the outcomes of those, like when people did the eyeball tattoos and were going blind and still are going blind, even these many years later after the trend is over.
Man,
I mean, I don't know if people are still doing it.
So do you remember, I don't know if you were caught this, but in 2007 there was a extreme body modification. This dude amputated his arm and gave it to his twin brother, and then they mounted it on the twin brother's body. Do you remember that shit?
No, I do not.
Yeah, had his brother's right arm surgically attached to his right pec muscle, and
Jesus Christ.
And yeah, so his brother cut his arm off so they could do an art project. It's so messed up. That seems like a, oh yeah, well look what I did, look what I did kind of thing. It's not a functional arm. It can't move it. It just hangs there and has a tattoo. Big full arm tattoo.
Bet he regrets that shit now. Like right now, I bet he's regretting that shit.
Oh yeah.
Just right now as we speak.
Yeah, 100%.
If he's awake, he's probably just regretting that shit, no matter what he's doing.
Oh yeah. I bet he's got to be real careful so it doesn't cut blood flow off to it. I bet it's always in the way. I bet he's always checking to make sure it's not getting cold. I guess he could always just remove it, but then his brother doesn't have an arm. Maybe they could reattach it. That's even more fucked up.
Yeah, I'd be pretty pissed. I mean, I would never do it in the first place, but if somebody was like, yeah, let's do this thing, I'm going to need your arm. Like, after 3 or 4 months, I don't know if they can give you your arm back, but I don't want this anymore. It's not you, it's me.
That's not, I mean, just as a end note, attaching your brother's arm to your body is not how you join Banksy. That's just not it. I don't care. That's like,
Well, okay, so that not to go back to the grotesque art, and just beat on it. But a lot of art is bad,
yeah.
objectively and retrospectively and aesthetically. And the idea of using like exploring the grotesque as a reason to make bad art to me always felt like a cop out or some shit that I don't know if they were trying to plant that notion so then the dealers could sell a bunch of
Oh,
terrible.
it's a way to couch an aesthetic in, oh, you're just too sensitive. You can't handle it. It's too intense. It's too sophisticated.
I mean that's how they
It's bullshit.
those are the phrases they use to gaslight people into trying to like it.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like it's like the worst stuff.
Nobody ever was meant to like it in the way that people are meant to like aesthetically pleasing art, but they just lie and make it seem like they do. And that's like, to me, the people who eat raw kale and are like, oh, this is fucking delicious. No, fuck out of here. Fuck you. Fuck you, you liar. No.
Man,
Like,
yeah, like
don't tell me that. Don't tell me you've gotten used to. Shut up. Don't.
no.
Those people.
I think we can establish.
Oh, I appreciate grotesque art.
We can firmly establish
me.
right now that you've got to cook kale, like boil it like several times and drain the liquid off several times, because it's like every other green. You got to cook that stuff for a long time. Then it tastes wonderful. But you got to cook it for forever. You can't eat that stuff raw. I mean, I guess if you want to like completely cleanse your colon in the most painful way imaginable.
Yeah, so I'm just like,
No, it's a big, it's like a self-perpetuating lying joke that that nobody is benefiting from laughing at anymore. It's gone on so long that nobody's actually laughing about it. The people who came up with the joke are dead. But people keep thinking, oh yeah, it's just so intense. I remember seeing these images of, like, I think they were mouse heads or kitten heads on goblets. Some Russian artist had released this. If there was big outrage, like who kills animals and puts them on, tries to pass it as art, kind of thing. I think there really is a point where you can. It's almost like a weird litmus test, because you can start to tell where people are just like, they're not in it because this is actually interesting or thought provoking or spurs conversation or demonstrates creativity. It's about watching people squirm.
that's exactly it. Which is, I don't know if you remember when the shock comedy was most popular. But it's the same. It's the same shit. It was never funny. It was just watching people squirm about the subject was funny, which was what ultimately got the laugh. Which, as long as it went, that's how it kept going, because it just appeared as if it was funny when it was in reality the audience cringing and seeing other people cringe that was causing the laugh reaction. So that's where that has a novelty time limit, and I think that's what happened with the grotesque art.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with like noise, music. People who are like, I enjoy noise music. Oh, fuck out of here. You enjoy noise music philosophically. You're not dancing to noise music.
Oh,
no.
Like, the only way that I will buy that somebody is into noise is if they've got a bunch of like oscilloscope or spectrum analysis tools loaded up on their computer, and they're interested in seeing what is actually in that noise. If they're looking for some kind of sometimes noise artists will try and generate, scenes in their spectrographs, and it's not. I don't think that's the kind of thing that's like palatable, though. It's not something that you can get a bunch of people to organize and listen to for long. And people pretend, they'll go to like a 30 to 45 minute experimental music performance, but it's really just watching a visualizer behind somebody twiddling knobs and pressing buttons over some like static or white noise or pink noise or some kind of weird pulsing sound. And I think it's actually more interesting in the physical space, because then you get to hear the room get excited and you get to hear the reflections off walls. But that's really subjective, because you have to be in a specific part of a room to hear those kind of sonic artifacts and that kind of comb filtering. And not everyone's going to even be able to hear those things, because you have to be trained to even be aware that they're there. So I've already described a really weird niche hobbyist, not a common person. I have tools that allow me to look at spectrograms and I don't get into that stuff. After a while, it's engineering, and it's not that cool. It's like, yeah, I know where this weird like cycling is happening. We've identified the frequency range. Let's start muting everything so we can figure out where it's coming from. Oh, we've isolated the sound. Let's fix it. Cool. Ground lift. Noise gone.
It's really weird how with frequency modulation, once you hit a certain point of understanding, it feels elementary, but to other people, that level of understanding would be like professor level. And it's like the understanding of frequency and frequency modulation obviously goes beyond audio and goes into visual, which is where you're talking about the picking, the image from the sound in the oscilloscope. But that, as you also allude to, that gets boring. So I don't buy somebody that's like doing that shit for like 5 years the way we went to drum and bass shows. You know what I mean? In terms of
nobody went to. There were no. Wait, no, that's not true. I went to a noise party in Wisconsin once. It was once. It was in
go for 5 years in a row.
Holy crap! I was there for like 15 minutes, and it was
you
just.
Know what I'm saying?
It was seriously. It was just whoosh, 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 whoosh for like 15 minutes. Then I walked into another room, and it was more of that weird washing, like crackling noise, and I thought the speakers were about to explode. And we turned around and left. We went and found a completely different party. Like looked for flyers all over the place until we found one that was happening that night, like, down the road an hour.
I was into coin collecting for like 2 months. Does that make me a coin collector? No. And that's where
it's a dabbler.
Going to one noise party for 15 minutes is not the equivalent of the way we went to drum and bass shows for 5+ years. I don't even know how many years it was. So excuse me. And the only reason
I think noise might be the realm of the audiophile who's really interested in listening to the sound of the equipment.
And I don't really buy audio files. It's like one of the things where, as somebody who has had experience with the highest level of equipment, audio files to me were just always people who once again wanted to show social class. Yeah. And it wasn't like they don't have some better understanding of sound or better ears or anything like that. They just want to show off that they can buy some $40,000 fucking speakers or something stupid. And that's where, and the only reason I say that is because once I understood frequency modulation, the free tools were just as good as the most expensive tools. The most expensive tools made shit quicker, but if I knew what I was doing, I could get damn near the same output. It just was a matter of, it just took more time. And so that's where, to me, it's again, audiophile. It sounds cool But it's like, well, yeah, you want to hear dust on a record? Okay, that's cool, I guess. I'd rather hear a fucking sound of something that doesn't have an artificially induced sound from the medium from which it was created that makes it feel warm or whatever the fuck they. Vinyl feels warm because of the pops. This is fucking dust. You're just hearing dust.
They're hearing electrons jump the gap between a piece of quartz and a piece of vinyl.
If that makes, I can add fake pops on a fucking, and I've done it before.
Yeah. So there's I just shared it to the Discord, but there's this Washington Post article about this guy who built what is arguably one of the greatest hi-fi systems of all time. At a $50,000 custom turntable and a 1,500-pound bass designed to isolate it from all vibrations, and he had these gigantic 10-foot tall speakers, and I mean it's actually quite beautiful. He had a huge investment in this, and then they had to sell it for like pennies on the dollar, like because nobody wanted the whole thing. Nobody wanted to buy the house because his house was like an audiophile listening room, and nobody wanted the house and the stereo system, so they had to sell the whole freaking stereo system because nobody wants the whole thing because it's like a $1 million stereo. Plus,
so I think the person who comes in and buys things that were purchased with poor planning or with poor long-term vision.
I mean, he couldn't sell it for anything because it was all custom made, and nobody wanted to buy a thing that didn't have a brand on it too. That was another problem.
That's the best place to be in. It's like not the person buying the $1 million sound kit. It's the person buying when he inevitably has to get rid of it.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. That's the best place to be in this economy to me.
I mean, this guy's got like Crane song equalization like in his stereo chain. That's like high end, like illustrious high-end level outboard gear for recording studios. Like,
what did it do for him?
What did he do? I can't tell what they're set at, but he looked like he was using them as EQs, which makes sense because that's what they are. But
no, I mean philosophically, what did it do for him? Did it make his life better? Because
he knew that he had the same equalizers that you find
it for pennies on the dollar. If it ended up making his life a net positive.
I
don't sell things.
I think he died. They had to sell the house.
Oh.
So they sold it because dude checked out, and his kids didn't want it because he forced them into labor when they were children and made them build his audio suite, and they're all and one of his kids was bitter about it for a long time. It's a really messed up story. I mean, there are parts of it that are definitely kind of sad because, like, man, this guy really, really put a lot of effort into this, but at the same time, it's kind of like he built himself into an isolated place. Even at the end, his local audiophile club, there's like 2 people showing up. This is a weird allegory about like building the nicest listening room.
I mean, it's fucking Citizen Kane.
Yeah. It is.
Is what it is.
It really is.
That's literally the story of Citizen Kane, which again, I feel like seeing it in high school was great for me. I took a film history class with one other person because nobody else took that class that year. So it was basically like a private tutoring on film history, and Citizen Kane obviously is taught for various reasons. Specifically, the most specifically for the emergence of many camera techniques that were invented for that. I mean, not for that film, but by Orson
Well,
Welles.
Orson Welles
Process of making that film.
Yeah, he was pretty involved in developing cinematography.
Of course, yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean,
like it's
but in that film specifically is the origin of um I think the way they use track photography or
oh
something.
yeah.
Like they had used it previously in like Birth of a Nation and I think Raging Bull, where also Raging Bull I think was the first use of the zoom and pan, which you need a track for,
Yeah.
but you also need a camera that can zoom. So there's these things where
That was like early too.
yeah, there's limitations on the technology that prevent certain camera techniques from or cinematography techniques from even happening until the confluence of the tech. So that's where again,
I think well into the 40s they were still using the same set of 4 lenses to compose all shots because zoom lenses are just expensive. They're real expensive to engineer and to build, and man, that was a pretty crazy era too. Like, have you ever seen the anamorphic lenses that they would use to do their carnival mirror magic to fit more information onto the film and then to spread it out across an even bigger screen? That stuff's crazy. They did a lot of really cool stuff. I think my favorite anecdote about the early era of like film is during the westerns, the early westerns, when they would bring Native American actors on set and then just tell them to say whatever they wanted. They would just talk shit about the people, the white men on the set. Nobody could understand what they were saying.
if memory serves, it was the confluence of lighthouse technology in tandem with the understanding of lenses that advance the camera evolution, in that the methods used to reflect light further distance, or refract light rather further distances, technically reflect and reflect. The combination of the two is how there's like multiple types of lighthouses in terms of some have multi-directional light and some have unidirectional, and the unidirectional lensing got then mimicked in cameras, so they were able to then
even the
different zooms,
even the Fresnels. I can never say it. It's a flat lens that they use in lighthouses now. Even that has been adapted to camera lens technology, and so it's possible to have these ultra long zoom lengths, focal lengths, in really compact bodies because the lenses are essentially flat because of that crazy shape that they got, that almost fingerprint-like shape. It's incredible. They have weird distortions at the absolute edges of performance, like the smallest focal length and the longest focal length. All lenses have a sweet spot, but they're really quite incredible because they're just so compact. They're easy to handle as a result. Lighthouses are crazy. I've only been in a couple, but those, like the light element that they utilize and the lenses. I can't.
They look absolutely insane.
Oh yeah.
In one, it doesn't. What they show on media doesn't really do it justice.
Not at all. Like a real lighthouse, it almost looks like it's what I expect to like a spaceship weapon in a science fiction, like some alien fusion beam emitter. That's what that looks like to me when I see it.
Well, I don't know if you've seen a tune mass damper in real life, where it's like it don't feel too far off.
Yeah.
And it's like those two things, they don't. it feels like the type of, like you said, it's like some shit you would see in a spaceship.
In a sci-fi movie, like straight up
Yeah.
space opera type shit.
Which again, it's like, seeing these types of structures built in the 1800s and 1900s, I understand the impetus for some people to want to inject some sort of alien discovery or some sort of like extraterrestrial mythos in there. But if you just look at the history of engineering, it just all makes a lot of sense in the way it's advanced, because a lot of the shit is like, you see the societal failures, you see the places where the earthquakes weren't taking buildings down for hundreds of years, but you see the effects of the earthquakes trying to take them down. And you see other places older where the earthquakes took them down. And it's like the natural progression of civilization. This also gets back to the notion of people who just haven't seen enough of the planet. And then because we're not given the scale of the globe, it makes it seem a lot smaller than it is. Like, what I realized in traveling, the more I travel to different countries, the more I've realized like these might as well be different planets. The more exposure you get to these places, because not only do the climates end up being just vastly different, and the cultures end up being vastly different, the terrain can look vastly different. So it ends up looking like, in some places, like you might as well be on Tatooine or another place. It looks like a rainforest planet because that's all you can see anywhere. You've traveled so far and you've seen forest and mist so far that that's all your mind can reconcile now that exists. So I understand the notion of, in the past when they didn't have planes, like the idea of the end of the world being a thing, because you can only fathom the world being so large because you've only seen a tiny portion of it. And I can understand it now, and knowing that when I was younger I couldn't understand it, it makes me feel bad, but also concerned for adults' capacity to make informed decisions when they've only seen their city, or even worse, like their county, and they've never bothered to leave their county. And that person's gonna get online and share their shitty opinion about how the way they think the world should be, when they don't even know the rest of their fucking state, let alone what the rest of the world should be like, and try to extend their stupid little fucking life experience as if it's a lesson for somebody else. Because that's, the more I experience, the less I think I should try to tell somebody else how to experience this shit. Whereas I feel like it's the other end of the spectrum, where people who haven't been out of their fucking little stupid county, who try to be like, you need to fucking go read the Bible and do these things, and you need to follow Christ and your life will get right. Like, motherfucker, you've never faced any real difficulty. You've lived on your farm that your grandfather got from the government, that you want to act like he worked hard for, that the government just gave him. And these people grew up in these situations that are disconnected from the past, not realizing nobody in America worked hard for anything. They either stole it or fucking did some illicit shit and made a bunch of money. That's how America got rich. It's one or the other. Nobody worked fucking hard. Sorry, anybody who disagrees and wants to like, oh, fuck him. No, he stole labor. That's it. You don't need to like argue like, Vanderbilt. No, he stole labor too. Fuck him. He doesn't count. Jeff Bezos. Nope. Labor theft. All of them stole labor. So the farther back you go, the more egregious the labor theft gets. The modern labor theft doesn't look as terrible because there's historical, just absolute horrible labor theft in the precedent to make modern day labor theft not look as bad. But it's all labor theft that's making these people rich, and they'll say it's something else. Oh no, I'm buying low, selling high, including the labor. No, it's just theft. It's just all fancy theft and covering up the theft. That's all. Nobody got rich working hard ever. I don't buy it. I don't buy it because I've worked hard, and the hardest work I've done has been for the lowest pay. If anything, when you get paid more, you do less work. And I don't just mean physical. Like, yeah, thinking involves work, and people who do thought work have different levels of it. But the ones that have to do the most thought work still don't get paid the most in the thought work industry. So like, Elon Musk does not think more than the fucking engineers who have to implement his dumbass ideas. That's not how that works. The person Elon comes to and is like, hey, I've got this stupid fucking idea for this thing.
I saw the absolute, speaking of stupid ideas, I saw the absolute best commercial or implementation of the concept of the Hyperloop of all time. It was in Men in Black 4, which I've decided is simply Men in Black cosplay because it's a terrible Men in Black story. But they have the coolest version of Hyperloop. Like it goes from a subway train and it transforms into this space Mercedes subway train, and it flies through a tube from the United States to Europe, or it kind of flies in a tube, just like Hyperloop. But it's a science fiction movie, and I know that because that's the only place that kind of technology can materialize and exist and be somewhat coherent.
Yeah. Man, Hyperloop. What to say in that? Something that depends upon a vacuum seal is not going to be a great passenger vehicle.
Oh, God.
Let me say that one more time. Something that depends upon a vacuum seal is not going to make a great passenger vehicle, period. So
imagine what happens to we saw what happens to those poor bastards in that submarine can. Imagine what happens to the poor bastards in the the mail tubes chute.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing is the mail tube chute is the closest thing one would get to being in a working Hyperloop scenario, and one can only imagine the type of acceleration that in science fiction, when you ever hear activate inertial dampeners, those things actually have a fucking function, even though they've been made into a joke. If you didn't have inertial dampeners,
you'd die.
That person would have if they didn't physically get smashed against the wall, their internal organs would just get crushed to the point where their heart probably wouldn't be able to beat fast enough or hard enough to resist the force of gravity pushing against it. So they just like die from the blood not pumping.
One of the things about inertial dampers that I always thought like was never addressed properly in Star Trek is that those things do fail. Like sometimes the EMS conduits lose power distribution, and sometimes the inertial damping field is not consistent across the entire ship. And there's probably some poor bastard who's just doing their job, some red shirt probably, and they're walking around. And next thing you know, the order is given, hey, prepare for we're jumping to warp, and they're just walking through the halls, and then they crap themselves because the inertial dampers had like 35% effectiveness. So it was just enough to prevent them from suffering any kind of serious injury, but it squeezes everything out into their suit. And that's a thing that will happen, with, obviously I'm projecting a variation where our inertial dampers are built by the lowest bidder, NASA, and they're not going to.
I don't think they can accurately reflect them in science fiction, because if they fail at any point, it's just like splat. If it even makes a splat, and it don't just like vaporize because of the
crossing the warp
energy
field
transfer.
threshold.
Yeah, if somebody, because it's like if they're at warp, really at warp, and the inertial dampeners fail during warp or when they're coming out of warp, either one, they're gonna either hit the back wall or the front wall. It's one of the two. And that amount of energy transfer.
So maybe not like 30% effective. Maybe it's like they drop down to like 98% effectiveness, and so that's when somebody craps themselves or they puke. Puking would make more sense. That'd be like the Quentin Tarantino version. He'd have somebody on the bridge, and they just chuck up a little bit of puke on their console.
Like, I think the one joke that speedster shows have gotten pretty
gotten
well.
right.
It's like your inner ear would be so confused if not just your ear drums blown completely, like, and your ears would, if it didn't just blow completely,
your stomach would be so upset.
I mean, if it didn't burst,
yeah,
like that amount of pressure change, it might just make your anything which can expand or contract burst. Like your lungs, your stomach, your fucking eardrums, your eyeballs. That without inertial dampening, that type of speed movement, yeah, being sick means it didn't burst any of your organs. So if you get sick, you're lucky because your skin's still intact.
Your eyes are still working.
It didn't burn off. Like your skin could burn off from that amount of friction potentially, like at that speed change. So there's so many things about, you can't think about that type of shit too hard, because it just
that's why you can't trust a used starship, because you'd never know how effective the inertial dampers are. You might try to go into warp, and then your part of your arm starts burning off, and nobody knows why, but you look up there, and then that freaking inertial dampener emitter, it's like got some crust on it, some space crust.
Yeah, because I think in the any sci-fi I've seen them fail, they are either using it as a joke, or it's some dramatic moment where people then get flung against the wall and things start sparking, but nobody really dies from those impacts or really splats from those impacts, except I don't know if it's happened in the Invincible universe, but
that'd be the place where it would happen.
Yeah, that might be the only place it would happen. Because
what was that? There's like a Jupiter's Legacy.
Oh yeah,
it could happen in that universe.
That was okay. That was a decent show. I won't say it was good.
Yeah, it was what it was.
Some, like, tropey stuff. I feel like Jupiter's Legacy to me was the first time where I realized binge watching or binge drops of shows are not good for anybody. It's not good for the show. It's not good for the audience. It's not good for longevity.
Yeah.
And I was a binge watcher before But once Jupiter's Legacy came and went so quickly, it came and went in a weekend because everybody watched it. Everybody who was going to watched it that one weekend and never discussed it ever again. We were the first people to discuss Jupiter's Legacy since the weekend it came out. I fucking promise. Nobody has thought about Jupiter's Legacy since that fucking weekend because they all binged it and then something else came out and replaced it. Because things that are in your short-term memory don't get committed to long-term memory unless you actively commit them. And this is where they can be committed to long-term memory if they start to extend past the long-term. But this is where, like, if you watch a movie and it's not engaging, halfway through, you're going to be like, what the fuck happened at the beginning of that movie? Because you didn't commit any of it to memory because you're just experiencing a short-term loop to short-term loop because none of it's worth committing to memory. And this, to me, is the problem with a lot of media, but not all media has this problem, which is where when then we engage with media that prompts us to commit it to long-term memory. I think that's where people want to discuss things on Monday after the weekend. Oh, did you see such and such? And that's where that second level of engagement with a piece of media comes from, in that it's like engaged. It's been entered into long-term memory and people want to like keep examining it because it's there, not for any specific reason, but now this information is in our psyche and we're like, what do I do with this now? Let's like figure out if I can approach it from different angles. Was the ending of the movie good or bad? What about part in act 2? So this notion to unpack things can only happen if something gets to long-term memory in the first place. And the irony is, it's like the shit in the median is not what goes to long-term memory. It's the extremely good or the extremely bad, because extremely bad stuff is memorable for different reasons. So that's where you get these people who watch B movies instead of good movies. And it's like easier to find a bunch of bad movies. And then
so it turns out that everything that I thought was Jupiter's Legacy was actually Invincible. And my memory of Jupiter's Legacy is basically a bunch of...
No, they're so it's not you. Jupiter's Legacy is not far off from Invincible's storyline, even down to the lead character's costume is like the same color scheme. So it's not that I'm gonna call you on that in that you're not wrong, because I watched Jupiter's Legacy, I watched Invincible, and one of them copied the other one's homework. I'm going to say Jupiter's Legacy copied Invincible's homework because of the timeline, but it's also not that original. Well, that's what I meant when it was like tropey, in that a lot of this shit in Jupiter's Legacy is like, yeah, you could just be like, in fact, the way I thought of it was like Jupiter's Legacy felt like the live action version of Invincible as the closest thing we've gotten so far, which is also why I think a lot of people just slept on it again. It's like we had Invincible by that, or I don't know if we had Invincible by that point, but it was like, I think, planned and people knew Invincible was coming. So anybody who was familiar with Invincible was going to be like, oh yeah, Jupiter's Legacy was cool, but Omni-Man is going to be better. So it's not you. It's not you misremembering.
I mean, I searched for Jupiter's Legacy and Omni-Man, and that's when I realized, wait, why is it showing me Invincible stuff? Well, that's just
like
funny.
The origin of the powers is slightly different. But even down to
Utopian, that's the guy's name. I never would have remembered Utopian. That's such a terrible name.
Yeah, like the
I mean, that makes
the bad
Amazo
guy.
seem like brilliant character name development. Amazo is terrible. That's a terrible name, but it's way better than Utopian. Oh, goodness.
It's weird in that looking at the suit design, it was really comic accurate for the show, but I don't think enough people knew the comic to make it matter.
Yeah.
I've been a comic fan for a long time, and the first I'd heard of the comic was when the show came out. Not to say I'm, um, looking for indie shit. I guess it's Image, so Image is technically still indie, so I don't. It's just the biggest indie. Uh,
There's a lot of Image comics that I've enjoyed reading when I couldn't find anything else to read. And they had decent artwork. The stories are always a lot darker than Marvel stories. That's what I remember from them.
well, are you familiar with the origin of the company?
I'm sure that I've read about it before, but I can't remember it right now.
So, not like I won't get into specifics, but philosophically, Image emerged because the artists weren't getting ownership of their properties, and as you also alluded to, they were forced to follow comics code, so the stories had to be like tame and weren't really adult oriented. So you got people leaving Marvel, and specifically wanting to, like, Marvel and DC for that matter, and founding this place where they're like, I don't want to become that thing. And so any of the new artists that came in, they would give them ownership of their property and share the like profits in a way that Marvel and DC weren't doing. And they've kept that fairly well to this day. So it's not like they started that way and then became super corporate. Like, Image has managed to stay fairly independent minded, even though it's a huge company. But I think relative to Marvel and DC, it's technically still independent size, which is where they've just been super successful. It's like, it's just the most successful indie company. So I think that's where Image is like a very unique story for independent companies, because they don't really tend to last this long when competing against corporate entities, to the point of like Marvel or DC, in that Marvel and DC weren't corporate entities like the way they are now when they first started, but once they got close to their death in that cycle, they got absorbed into larger companies, which is where it's basically like Warner Brothers and Disney now. It's like, yeah, they're Marvel and DC, but really it's Warner Brothers and Disney. So
Yeah.
on the one hand, it's like, that's what happens in capitalism. It's the inevitable Ouroboros of capitalism. But Image has managed to kind of avoid those trappings to a degree, because it's still not, it could still potentially eventually fall, but the successes of things like Invincible or like Walking Dead, there's a few other ones. Like, I won't say Spawn, in that Spawn has had ups and downs. So like that property is not, even though it's like the flagship success effectively, it's not without its valley points in its history. So Image is like a very interesting. Oh, well, and that's also where McFarlane transitioned to like making models and
Yeah.
inevitably knowing that there was a ceiling on comic book production profit possibility. I think that's where him getting into the like high end collectible is really where being able to license those image properties then not they and they don't just do image like they um him getting the license for the base MLB was a huge deal. uh he's also again McFarlane has had his ups and downs too, so it's like none of this stuff is without a point after its initial success that it looked like it was going to fail, which is also where image being able to survive that initial failure point this long is a good sign. But a lot of other companies have come and gone in the process. Like, do you remember Valiant?
I do.
They were the hottest thing at one point, which is crazy. And man,
they had really good artwork. That's what I remember.
They did. It was like hyper stylized. I won't say hyper realistic because it wasn't realistic. It wasn't photorealism. It was
No, it was just like
stylized.
Yeah, extra contrasty. It made the images like jump
very hard lines.
Yeah, like images would jump out of the page practically.
They had like the hardest lines of anybody. And there was no like, I won't say there was no movement blurring, but it was like a flat visibility, whereas a lot of other comics use imitation of photography, focal, like image parallax.
Oh, the bokeh effect, where the image starts to become less or more diffuse the further away you get from the focal plane. Yeah.
Yeah, they just didn't. It's like they didn't use that at all.
I don't think that was even a style in cinema then during that period of time. Like from like even from the 90s through the early 2000s, I don't even think anyone was really trying to use that kind of technique. Everything was still really crystal clear. In fact, in the early 2000s, like right around the time that HD started becoming a thing, that's when we really started to see that emerge in like television and movies started doing it more. But it really was like that was like the sacred ground of the actual film, not just a movie. It's like a artistic technique, but it
had to.
I think it was really just the availability of cameras that could do it, because up until that point, a lot of like the available camera systems that were being used to produce television, like those sensors were so small that kind of effect was very difficult to achieve. Like in the lens, I mean.
It wouldn't achieve them in that the original, like the period you're talking about, one of the reasons a lot of the media looks so weird is that the people who didn't try to produce that effect didn't understand or care that digital photography flattened the image, and then they had to artificially induce that effect. So if they didn't do it, everything was going to be clear, no matter if it was in the foreground or background. And if you pay attention to it, it's going to look weird. But if you don't pay attention to it, you're just gonna feel like something's off, and you can see everything, and you don't know why.
That's like the soap opera effect where everything's in focus.
Yes, exactly.
It's only cool when you're watching sports.
It's either you either call it soap opera or like countries where there's shit stuck in the 80s, like they haven't caught up to modernity, and their shit looks like everything's soap opera effect, even if it's supposed to be a procedural detective show. Like their shit all looks like that because it's all flat.
My favorite era of television was the 80s when like everything looked like a screenplay. when backgrounds were flat, and so because of the lack of translation quality of the capture medium and the broadcast and presentation medium, the tube televisions, it made everything even fuzzier. So now if I ever go back and I see something that was made like, you know, in the 80s, like MacGyver, I love that stuff, but it's so hard to watch.
And I think what you're also getting at is I think the reason our generation has such nostalgia for our films that we grew up with, but also for that period, is it was I want to say the most saturated time of gigantic film sets in tandem with expensive or big budgets for CGI, because one or the other is going to get a certain type of outcome that is not really the best, like, visual experience. But I'm gonna say it, a movie, and when I say it, you're gonna be like, holy fuck. When you think about when it first came out, Stargate.
Oh, Stargate's spectacular.
And the reason it's spectacular is because the sets they built for that were fucking gigantic.
Oh yeah,
they were scale size sets.
Well, the wormhole was a practical effect. It wasn't CGI.
Well, that part, but I'm saying like the outside of the temple.
Oh yeah,
that was a full size fucking set. So when you're talking about going in to the actual Stargate and seeing this fucking CGI effect that they spent who knows how many millions on to get the liquid effect that had not really been done at that time.
That first time when they first opened it, that's practical effects. That's like water and
of course.
But then like the tunnel itself,
it's like the best combo of practical and CGI. Which again, that's where I'm saying we grew up with movies that were doing the best combination of practical and CGI, and that's the crux of my point. In that, once
we also had examples of pure practical effects, like The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which is amazing, one of the most incredible practical effects movies.
I'm gonna say another movie, and when I say it, you're gonna be like, "Oh fuck, I remember that too." Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
They were so ambitious.
They tried to sell this idea.
They were so ambitious
that they could do an entire movie with CGI, and other people, because they tried to do it, people never stopped trying to do that.
Yeah.
So like, to me, that's why we have Christopher Nolan's today, who are then like, I want to do as much practical as possible, because it became this sort of like dichotomy of like, oh, you either use practical or you use CGI, because Sky Captain and the fucking World of Tomorrow tried to convince everybody the CGI would solve every problem. And it's like the same tech bro bullshit that tries to push a single solution for every problem, as if a combination of practical and CGI isn't always better. It's always better. So where I'm like,
yeah, like 300 wouldn't it nearly have been as good had those dudes not sprayed extra like muscle marks, like cut to make them look more cut up.
But they also wouldn't have looked better if they didn't touch it up in post.
That too. They had to do all the things. They had to do like some variation of P90X, and they had to spray like lines on their body, and they had to go in and get extra muscular.
Do a bunch of steroids.
Yeah.
You can't get that without doing the steroids, which is why Gerard Butler got fucking titties now. You know what I'm saying? It's like they get the steroids and then they get the titties later, but that's part of the practical.
Can't have digital muscles. Like, digital muscles just don't look right without like something to build them on.
Exactly. Chris Hemsworth shit got touched up too, but he had to go do the steroids and put in the work first for the practical side. So that's where I'm like, understanding that the best is going to be a combination of practical and computer touch up. Like, we knew that by proxy of growing up in that best period. But I think people forgot what made the original Jurassic Park good, in that now when you have this film that's like all CGI basically, and then the actors have to carry like 97, 99% of the job because they're like pretending some dude with a bunch of dots all over him is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. We don't appreciate, I mean, not us, but the people who grow up with that don't appreciate what it could have been if they made movies like Jurassic Park now with the best combination of practical and CGI. So I think in going back and watching those films, there is a benefit of learning the history of the technology in film, which I feel like should be, I'm sure there's a course taught somewhere, but I feel like the technology of film just doesn't get enough addressing to get the understanding of why certain things looked a certain way in a certain period, or why people were doing a certain thing, trying, like Zack Snyder, his cinematography.
Man, I'm pretty sure those
like,
kids were terrified when that T-Rex was destroying that Jeep or Explorer or whatever it was.
Yeah, I'm sure they were, but that's also why.
Because that was like
filmed,
a giant ass robot T-Rex.
I think, was it the Twilight Zone? One of the kids died because the fucking practical effect went wrong and the chopper crashed.
Yeah.
So it's like there is a benefit of not having a mechanical T-Rex, because if shit goes out of control and it starts biting the kid when it's not supposed to, then you can't undo that. You can undo a CGI. So I'm like, I get philosophically the need, like, of course Chris Evans isn't going to be able to hold a fucking helicopter with his hand. Like, it's just not a good stunt to try to pull off and make it seem like it's real. Yeah, we should use CGI just so nobody dies. I get that.
It wouldn't have looked the same if Dr. Grant had stuck his hands into a CGI pile of dinosaur poo. It had to be like a giant steaming pile of something that actually looked like poo. We would have known.
Or,
every kid who's played with mud would have been like, that's not real.
It's like, I can't even think of the name of the movie, but we got so much cultural lampooning of the movie with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Sean Connery. Like, I could obviously look up the title. It doesn't matter. The title doesn't matter. What matters
Entrapment.
Is in the film, they did a practical effect where they had somebody climb one of the tallest fucking towers in the world at the time, but it's the tallest, like one of the tallest, it was like a financial building in China or some shit, or Hong Kong. Nobody cared. All they cared about was Catherine Zeta-Jones' ass during the laser scene. They did all that fucking practical effect, and it got forgotten in the zeitgeist because Catherine Zeta-Jones fucking did some shit with that laser. And then people don't even remember Catherine Zeta-Jones. They think it was Jennifer Lopez because all they remember is the ass. They don't even remember. They don't even care whose ass it was. Some woman's ass. That's all they remember is ass and lasers.
I think that Entrapment is like the worst Mission Impossible movie ever made.
It's not even a mission. Yeah, it's a like excuse for Sean Connery to get close to Catherine Zeta-Jones. That's all that movie was. Because it's like...
Hence Mission Impossible.
I mean, I feel like Mission Impossibles are an excuse for Tom Cruise to do some crazy shit and make... Like, I feel like he's trying to hold on to that period where he's like, I want to be fucking... Goose or whatever the fuck his name was. Maverick. I don't know.
Moose. Moose is so much better.
Moose. Yeah. Not Goose. Moose.
Moose.
But like I know Tom Cruise just wants to live out this like nostalgic fantasy of that first time when they made Top Gun and they were actually in that fucking plane and they actually had cameras on it, and he's like, this is the pinnacle of film in his mind when they're shooting it, and he's never let go of that shit, which is why he has to do all of his stunts and put the film studios at risk of like potentially having to spend too much insurance because Tom Cruise wants to fucking do a fight scene on top of a train. on top of a moving train. Does he want to do it on top of a train behind the green screen? No, he wants to do it on the fucking train before it goes into the tunnel. So it feels real.
He'll never be as cool as Jackie Chan.
Of course not. He wants to be Jackie Chan.
He wants to be, and he can't even be in a movie with Jackie. If he was in a movie with Jackie Chan, he would still take second seat in the stunt work.
Even with old Jackie Chan. So that's where I'm like, that's all that's causing this. Like, it's a neurotic insecurity at this point. Tom Cruise is too old to be doing fight scenes on top of moving fucking trains. That's why Jackie Chan is out here training goddamn Jaden Smith instead of doing the fucking jumping from fire escape to fire escape as an old man.
He's done that plenty.
Shit. He's done it enough. He's not insecure anymore. Tom Cruise is too insecure to stop doing it. So that's where I'm like, Tom Cruise should just stop. Go be with your family, Tom Cruise. Go be with your family. Same thing for fucking Dwayne Johnson. Go be with your family, motherfucker. Stop doing all these stunts where you might break your neck or break somebody else's neck or hurt somebody. Just go home. Go be with your family. But no, they have a compulsion and they can't fucking stop for whatever reason. They got more money than goddamn Oprah. You got more money than Oprah. Just stop. You don't need to kill yourself doing a stunt. So to me, it's like, I see these things happening and but again, I know for a fact that we grew up with the best. It's like when we grew up, movies did not, or film studios didn't care about capitalism, and capitalism had not sought a reward on the film studio because it was giving the reward without the reward being sought. So it's like, if you got a film studio that's making blockbusters, the executives aren't going to come in and start giving you notes. But that first time you make a sequel, RoboCop 2 didn't sell as much as you thought it was because you actually got lucky with the social climate, the amount of money people had to go spend on going to movies, and this week of the year, and you think you can just do it again. Now they're going to start coming in and giving you fucking notes, and then you get RoboCop 3 and he's got a fucking jetpack because they need to sell toys. And it makes no goddamn sense in the context of the movie why he's got a fucking jetpack. And he uses the jetpack once and immediately discards it. Like, if you got a jetpack, keep it. Then you can use it next movie. RoboCop 4, but no, they need to make something else for the now they don't have enough money to finance RoboCop 4, so they're going to sell the rights and make a shitty TV show, and they're going to have to come up with a new plot because they can't use either of the actors from the previous stories. So the one you use to replace Peter or Peter.
Yeah, Peter Weller.
You can't use either one of those actors. So now the RoboCop TV show is some complete third-rate bullshit that they're trying to extract some value from the property because RoboCop 1 got lucky and
RoboCop Prime directives.
Verhoeven took the script and made it, and the satire that he injected into the film was necessary for him to inject. You couldn't just come in and fucking, I'm going to do a film in Verhoeven style. No, AI is not going to be able to do that. A person couldn't do that. A person couldn't come in and just copy Paul Verhoeven. They tried. They tried multiple times. They tried with Starship Troopers. They tried with fucking RoboCop. They tried every time Paul Verhoeven makes something, studios try to come in and copy his shit, but they don't have his perspective, so it never comes out the same. AI ain't gonna be able to do it because a human couldn't fucking copy. So that's where, to me, there's this like clear point in film history where you have this like, you got the Spielberg, you got the Lucas, you got the Verhoeven, Eventually you get Nolan, and there's like an arc of people who basically get blank checks and don't get notes on their work, and their output is fucking amazing. Like after like Empire Strikes Back, people will debate whether that's the best sequel of all time. Where I'm like, most sequels are not only way worse than the first film, they're just not good generally. It's like it's very difficult in the medium of film to make long form arcs beyond a single film because that's not the medium. Like it's not episodic. Like there were points when episodic stories were being told in theaters, but those things are like 4 hours long. So like if you went to a theater on a Saturday and saw an episodic story, you're going to be there for like 4 hours, not 2 hours, not 90 minutes. It's going to be like 4 hours. So yeah, that's basically what we get with miniseries now. But at a point when people couldn't afford to buy their own TVs, they were basically going to the theater to watch a miniseries on a Saturday morning. And that got abstracted into television, and episodic stories got effectively relegated to television because making episodes in film was made way more difficult. But that didn't stop it, because you got like things like the Thin Man series where it clearly builds a story arc for the characters involved. Every film is self-contained, but the audience over the course of the series starts to get more of an understanding of the world in which the Thin Man series takes place. It's not like a final arc, but there is like an arc to the characters in terms of their lives developing. It's not like is not anything much different than a regular person's life, but it's still episodic over the course of multiple movies, which there's not many Thin Man series. There's only one Thin Man series.
There are 33 MCU movies with 11 more in the pipelines.
There's only one MCU. DCEU couldn't pull it off.
Nope.
DCU is going to try it. They're probably not going to be able to pull it off because there's only one MCU. MCU could barely pull it off. They can't pull it off now. They didn't. In 2023, I do not believe any of their movies made $1 billion, if I'm not mistaken. So even they can't continue to pull it off. Which they may be able to get back to it, but this gets back to the notion of like the idea that something can be peaking forever, or like once it hits its peak, we can just coast. Like, no, inevitably things are going to fall. And I think corporations have a hard time adapting to it because they're not organisms, even though they try to claim personhood and legally have personhood at this point. Their inability, let me reframe that. Some corporations' inability to adapt is why they inevitably fail. But Disney, as an example, has had too much power, and in the process of trying to survive, they started trying to modify their environment in the form of whether it's lobbying to get certain laws passed or changed, which they successfully did, or buying whole towns and building whole towns. Disney adapts but their capacity to make other things adapt to it, I think, is going to be an actual long-term problem for it as an organization, because eventually they're not going to be able to do that. And I think we may have actually passed that point in that they started getting pushback from DeSantis. The audience doesn't just blindly go to films anymore. I think the audience that blindly went to films happened to be the Spider-Man audience, and now that's effectively relegated to Sony, which is why you didn't get any MCU films in 2023. Which is why I would guess you didn't get any MCU films in 2023 that crossed $1 billion, because it's not actually. It was never. I don't think the MCU people. It was like Spider-Man people. I don't think Avengers people were a thing. I'll debate this with people. I don't think Avengers people were a thing before MCU. I don't really think they're a thing after the MCU, if we're being honest. People will lie and say they like the Avengers, but if you push them, most of those people will definitely like the X-Men more, or they'll have specific members of the Avengers team that they prefer, because the Avengers always sucked. They were always avenging because they fucking lost.
I think that's pretty accurate. I like individual elements of the Avengers, but I think every Avenger is more interesting in their standalone story arc. Whereas with X-Men, I don't really even like Wolverine on his own. They're more interesting when they work together. And so
let me ask, when did you stop liking Wolverine? Because I want to say Hugh Jackman is when a lot of people stopped having Wolverine as their main X-Men, because Hugh Jackman is the antithesis of what Wolverine was.
No, it wasn't actually Wolverine. I've always liked Magneto. But
he's not an X-Man. He's led the team before, but he's technically not an X-Man. So I will accept him being as an X-Man. Your favorite. He's not. I'm saying he's one of your favorite people in an X-Men universe. That's like saying Charles is an X-Men. No, he's not. Like, you can't be one of Xavier's men and be Xavier. You see what I'm saying? Like, the notion of the Xavier School for the Gifted. Like, yeah, you can be a professor and be an X-Man.
Well, then I really don't like any of the X-Men, but I like when they work as a team. I'm always rooting for Magneto, because
Magneto, like, he's been the head of the school before.
I don't think that
and he's gone out with the squad, but I don't think
that the X-Men are actually going to be able to accomplish the goal of integrating mutants and humans together. It's the universe they exist in is not friendly to mutants. And that's just the reality. It's like the version of communism that we have is the stuff that China does, unfortunately, and the stuff that the Soviet Union did, and the stuff that exists in North Korea right now. And we can talk about, like, theoretical underpinnings of socialism, but the example we have right now is what we've got. The universe the X-Men reside in, that place is so vicious. I think that's why I like it more than the Avengers universe. Avengers universe, people are still seem to have hope that they can all coexist and get along, and maybe I'm just being really pessimistic about it, but Avengers universe only works if all of the smallest problems of the world have been resolved, whereas X-Men, all of the world's problems still exist, and everyone still hasn't figured it out yet. The world's largest weapons manufacturer doesn't stop making weapons overnight and switch to a arc reactor technology without, considerable economic. Yeah, there are too many things. There are too many things about the Avengers universe that are just too. The gears are way too greased in that universe. Everything moves way too smoothly. Even when things are supposed to be falling apart, things move way too smoothly. I think that's my real complaint about that story universe. They're facing Armageddon at the end of it's the end of existence, yet it seems like smooth sailing for Tony Stark.
Well, and that's where, like, I think in the Avengers universe, a lot of the stuff that's cool is everything but the Avengers.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's fine, but you did have people acting like they were Avengers stans, and like the Avengers as a team was their favorite thing since sliced bread at the beginning of the MC. Well, not at the beginning, in the peak of the MCU's popularity, because at the beginning, nobody was claiming Iron Man. Nobody was like claiming Thor 2.
I mean,
Dark
Thor's
World,
awesome, but Thor's not that awesome.
But Dark World, people still shit on it to this day, because especially when it came out, they were like, this is like the worst film ever. What are they thinking? And until
it's actually not Avengers, that
bad. No, it's not that. It's not terrible, but people's expectations changed once the Avengers team on the big screen, like, made $1 billion. It was something about the team making $1 billion. Everybody involved was like, oh, I'm on this team now. And then they made another $1 billion and like another $1 billion. And then it was like they started to branch off on their own, and people tried to like join teams if they could make $1 billion. Like, oh, I'm Team Spider-Man. And the Spider-Man stands, which have always effectively been there, propped up that franchise in a way that made Sony keep holding on to it. And if those people really wanted to like benefit the franchise of Spider-Man, they would have not gone, they would have like boycotted the films, so Spider-Man actually got absorbed back into the Marvel universe.
So
but they just got lucky that Sony played ball. Man,
there's so many things about X-Men and that bothered me, like the first trilogy that was just like a reimagining of everything. I enjoyed some of it, and then there's a lot of it that I have complaints about. And then like the go to the past to start the story over, the reboot, I actually enjoyed a lot of that too. And I thought that they were going to take it in a direction where they could build the story to eventually include, you know, things like X Factor or X Force and move the story forward into the future. But everything keeps cycling back. Like, my recollection is that the Avengers took place in like the 80s or maybe even in the 70s. And their story ended in the 90s when the X-Men became the PSA conduit. Nobody gave a damn about it.
No, it didn't end. It didn't end.
It just didn't become as important.
No, that's not what happened. They did West Coast Avengers and they did Great Lakes Avengers.
Yeah.
So the beat, like, they leaned into the Avengers being seen as a B team and started doing this like lampoon version of the Avengers. And then like the
West Coast Avengers, I forgot about them.
Yeah, exactly. So what ended up happening is the actual, like, I don't know if you remember,
She-Hulk was supposed to be on West Coast Avenger.
Yeah. But what happened was there was an Avengers arcade game that came out, and Vision specifically got popular because of the arcade game. And then I think Fox started doing Avengers characters TV shows. And so like Avengers characters came back in vogue because of the TV shows.
Well, I remember there was like a cartoon. There was Avengers Assembled.
Yeah.
But like
I think that was after the Iron Man.
I mean, that was way after X-Men cartoon too. That was
right.
like
X-Men was before all of them.
Oh yeah.
Which is like the Spawn.
But like no, but like, I mean,
they
like
did like a Silver Surfer TV show.
Yeah, that was in like the 80s though, wasn't it? That was like
No, it was the early 90s. But they did like a Spider-Man on Fox.
Oh, I remember that. That was also equally terrible. There have been multiple iterations of Spider-Man cartoons though.
Right. Because I think you might be thinking of the Spider-Man. No, I guess if you're thinking of a cartoon, that's
No, there was definitely like an earlier iteration of Spider-Man cartoon that was very bad. It's the one where we get all the memes where they point at each other.
I mean, yeah, that's. I thought you were talking about Silver Surfer.
Oh no, there was only one Silver Surfer cartoon, and that was actually a really good cartoon. That was like one of the most complicated, like philosophically challenging cartoons I think that has ever been. No, I just wish that they'd have, like, instead of recycling, then there's an entire Marvel universe that extends beyond, Apocalypse. There's a whole world where Days of Future Past story universe where all that stuff exists, and there's all these mutants that are interesting. X-Force is a really interesting story arc. Like the whole team of X Factor is really fun. Like they have really fun stories. There was a chick named Polaris with green hair. It was like Magneto's daughter. She was badass. Anyways, there's so many characters out there that don't get explored, and we get 33 MCU movies about the same characters. That how many times do we need to see them like land after jumping out of something and do that knee on the ground pose thing?
Oh God, I hate that.
Yeah, how many times do we have to see Thor shake his hammer and smile and then look like confused when something doesn't happen? There's so many characters that are already developed that have complete storyboarded stories ready to translate. We're getting the same characters over and over and over again. And I get it. There's a lot of X-Men that builds up so that we can have, an actual Days of Future Past story universe, not just one where they hint at it and then spend most of the time with Logan running around with bone claws, fighting unbelievably tiny Sentinels. Those things were so small. They were.
Yeah, I was just about to say
that shit made me so mad.
It was like ridiculous.
That was such bullshit. Sentinels are huge. Sentinels are like so imposing that they have to that Colossus throws Wolverine and to cut off its head, and the head shows up. It's the size of like a Volkswagen bus. Not something that could fit in the back of a van.
Well, and on that note, the fastball special with Hugh Jackman doesn't work. He's too big to do a fastball special.
Yeah,
she's like,
because Colossus, the proportionate size.
He's got to be squatting in Colossus's hand.
Yeah,
which is like in the comics, the size is just small enough where even though I think he's supposed to be something like 800 pounds because of the fucking adamantium, like his height is such that you'd believe that Colossus could like hold his arm back and toss him like a baseball.
Yeah, it's like a baseball. It's not a javelin.
No,
it's not.
Or not like throwing him like a duffel bag.
Yeah, it's not the midget toss.
They duffel bagged him in the movie.
Yeah,
the midget toss. Remember when that was a thing?
Oh, that was so terrible.
That was a weird period.
That was like the most fucked up. Like, hey guys, we can get a midget. We can throw him on a Velcro wall.
What? I'm still not convinced that whenever Neon came out and we were in that period where they're doing shit like midget tossing, that we weren't all in some LSD experiment. Just some nationwide LSD experiment.
I mean, they signed off on midget tossing.
Yeah. It was on TV.
It was on multiple TV shows. It was a feature in several movies. It was a thing. It like gained more prominence than the joke about donkey shows. Like it actually happened. You could order midget to throw at things. It didn't make any sense. That seems like the weirdest kind of exploitation that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I feel like people would probably, if they didn't know it was real, you or me talking about it would make them think we were horrible people. Like, just the fact that we know it exists.
I mean, I kind of feel horrible just for knowing that it exists.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.